Okay, so I want you to start by picturing a very specific and I think very common kind of tension.
Uh-huh.
You're sitting in a totally standard corporate conference room. You know, the fluorescent lights are humming.
I'm there.
And on one side of the table, you've got a 21-year-old intern. They they grew up swiping on iPads before they could really talk.
Right. The primary language is memes.
Exactly. And they see a strict 9 to 5 as like a loose suggestion from a bygone era.
And then sitting right across from them is a 65-year-old executive. This is someone who, started their career dictating memos to a secretary.
They remember when email was this risky new experiment that probably wasn't going to catch on?
Yeah.
So they're looking at the same project, but they're seeing completely different worlds. And the conventional wisdom, I mean, especially online, says this is a recipe for disaster.
Total gridlock.
Yeah.
Misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Culture wars.
We're looking at a stack of research today that suggests this friction. It isn't a bug. It's actually a feature if, and this is a big if, you know how to use it.
And that's really the defining challenge of the modern workplace, isn't it?
Right.
We are in this historically unique moment. It's not the standard generation gap.
No.
It's a time where we have, up to 5 generations working at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
And soon, with Gen Alpha starting internships, we are staring down the barrel of a 6th-generation workforce.
All sharing the same Slack channels.
All on the same Zoom calls, using the same broken coffee machine. It's a lot.
5 generations. I mean, you've got the silent generation, boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z, all trying to move the same ship.
It is. And usually the conversation just devolves into memes, okay boomer versus the whole lazy Gen Z thing.
It's good for TikTok, but it's terrible for management.
Exactly. So today, we're going to push all that noise aside. We have a source that gives a real tactical playbook for this. We're looking at insights from Anneliese Olson, who's a VP at HP.
And we should be clear about why we're listening to her. I mean, this isn't some academic theory. Olson is what you'd call a lifer, right?
Absolutely. She has real street cred. She started out as an intern 25 years ago and just climbed her way all the way up to VP.
Wow.
And she's managed teams everywhere, Europe, Asia, the U.S. So this isn't just a snapshot. It's a longitudinal view.
Yeah.
She's watched the culture morph from these rigid hierarchies to the hybrid world we see today.
So she hasn't just studied the shift, she's actually lived it.
She survived it.
That context is so important because she points to these shifts that aren't just HR policies. They're about operational survival. She says there were 2 huge tectonic shifts in her 25 years. The first one is, well, it's obvious on the surface, but the details are really complex.
The role of women in tech and business.
Right.
It's massive. And what's interesting here is we're not just talking in vague terms like empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
The source material has some hard data from HP that shows what real operational progress looks like.
Because saying you value diversity is one thing.
But showing the receipts is another.
Right. So lay those numbers on us. What does it actually look like in practice?
Okay, so 31% of tech and business roles at her company are female, which is a solid number. Then you look at leadership. Their board of directors is 58% women and ethnically diverse.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the stat that really, really stood out to me.
What's that?
Out of their 8 biggest global markets, 4 of them are run by women.
So a straight 50-50 split in their major markets.
Exactly. And the takeaway for you listening isn't just, HP is doing a good job. It's that diversity has moved from being a compliance thing, something you do to avoid a lawsuit, to being a core business strategy.
It changes how decisions are made, how risk is assessed.
It stops being an initiative and it starts being the actual operating system.
Which flows right into the second big shift she identifies, which I think is maybe even more radical because it affects absolutely everyone. She says the corporate ladder, that image we all have in our heads, it's dead.
It's dead, or at least it had been deprecated.
Yeah.
The old model was so linear. You get in at 22, you climb, you get your titles, corner office, gold watch.
Gone. She argues that the modern career path is a zigzag.
The zigzag. I feel like that describes my entire life, but, in a corporate context, that can sound chaotic.
Yeah, if I'm a hiring manager and I see a resume that zigs and zags all over the place, I might just think unfocused. How does she frame this as a good thing?
She rebrands it as agility. In this hybrid world, the real currency isn't just climbing up, it's the breadth of your skills. The zigzag lets you rotate laterally, learn a new skill set, maybe you pause for a life event.
And then step back in, but in a totally different department.
Right, and she really hammers this idea of flexibility. And not just work from home flexibility, career flexibility.
So why does this zigzag model matter so much?
Because it completely transforms work-life balance. which always sounds like a trade-off into work-life integration.
I see.
So if you're a caregiver or parent, the zigzag lets you stay in the game. You don't have to quit. You adjust the slope of your climb for a while.
That is the key right there. In the old ladder model, if you had a baby or a sick parent, you had to jump off the ladder. You were out.
Completely out.
All right.
And getting back on was incredibly difficult. The zigzag keeps that talent and all that institutional knowledge inside the building.
Which is so critical when you're trying to keep 5 different generations happy and productive. Okay, so let's get tactical. You've kept the talent. Great. Now you've got a 22-year-old and a 60-year-old on the same team. How do you actually get them to collaborate?
Olson lays out 3 specific buckets of strategy. The first one is something we've all heard of, mentoring and sponsorship. But with a twist.
There's always a twist. So it's not just the old person teaches the young person how stuff works.
Right, that's the default.
Yeah.
But she talks about this Catalyst program they started way back in 2017. Paired early career women with senior leaders. The goal was sponsorship, giving them a leg up. But the unintended consequence was reverse mentoring.
Ah, so the execs started learning just as much from the juniors.
The learning flowed both ways. The seniors were getting insights into digital tools, cultural shifts, stuff they were totally blind to.
And the demand is coming from the bottom up.
It is. In 2023, they launched these mentoring circles just because Gen Z and millennials were clamoring for growth. They had 200 people raise their hands instantly.
That's a huge signal. The younger generations aren't checking out. They're not quiet quitting. They are loudly asking for guidance.
They're starving for it. Which brings us to the second bucket. Training for empathy.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. I know some people hear empathy training and their eyes just glaze over. They think it's all fluffy HR stuff.
And that is such a dangerous assumption to make now. The data Anneliese shares is rock solid. Diverse teams are 12% more productive.
12%.
And inclusion drives 30% better performance. This isn't just about feelings, it's about output. If your team doesn't feel safe enough to speak up, you miss out on real innovation.
So empathy is actually a risk management tool.
It absolutely is. And HP has been doing this for a long time. They've had business resource groups since 1978. This isn't some new fad for them.
Which takes us to the third bucket. And this is the one I feel gets ignored a lot. We talk about childcare, sure, but Olson highlights life stages support that goes way beyond that.
Yeah, this goes beyond the fun perks. This is about biology, family. She mentioned some pretty rare examples like specific programs for menopause and perimenopause.
And support for employees dealing with aging parents.
That's the one that's going to become huge. We talk about the sandwich generation, caring for kids and parents. Elder care is this silent crisis for so many people.
So why is this a priority?
Well, look at the numbers she's working with. 21% of their workforce is over 50. But 60% of their executives are over 50.
Ah.
So if you don't support those later chapters, you're going to lose your entire leadership tier. You lose the people with the most knowledge right when you need them most.
So it's really a retention strategy for your most valuable players.
It's asset protection. Simple as that.
Okay, I want to shift gears a little. We promised some myth busting. We all have these generational stereotypes in our heads. So I'm going to throw one at you. And you use the source material to just destroy it. Ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, let's start with the youngest. Stereotype 1. Gen Z. The myth is they lack discipline, no work ethic. They just want to be on TikTok.
False. But with a nuance. The research she cites says Gen Z has a massive desire to learn. The friction isn't about laziness, it's about cadence.
Cadence? What do you mean?
They want timely feedback. They want constant iteration. They don't want to wait 6 months for an annual review.
They want collaboration now.
Exactly. So it's not a lack of work ethic, it's a demand for immediacy. To a boomer manager, that can look like impatience. To a Gen Z employee, waiting a year for feedback looks like pure negligence.
That's a great distinction. Okay, next up, millennials. The myth. They're all job hoppers, no loyalty, can't commit.
Also false, basically. The research shows the millennials are just as likely to stick with a company as older generations were at that same age.
So we were just confusing being young with being a millennial.
Exactly. The job hopping is more a function of age, not generation. As they've gotten older, their retention stats look pretty normal.
Okay, what about the forgotten generation, Gen X? The myth is they're the middle child, no X factor, not really changing anything.
She pushes back hard on this. She's like, look at the New York Times, the Washington Post, major institutions. The visionary leaders driving change right now, they're largely Gen X.
They're the bridge generation.
They're the translators. They're fluent in the analog past and the digital future. They are driving the bus right now.
I like that. All right, last one, baby boomers. The myth is they can't handle new tech. You know, the I can't convert this PDF trope.
Okay, this was my favorite data point in the entire source. A Microsoft survey showed that 50% of boomers felt they had the skills to meet the demands of AI.
50%. That sounds okay, I guess. But what's the baseline?
Well, you compare it to Gen Z, the digital natives,
Yeah.
still only at 65%.
Wait. So the gap between the kid who grew up with an iPhone and the executive who started with a typewriter is only 15 points.
It's not a canyon, it's a crack. 15 points is nothing. It proves boomers are lifelong learners. They've had to relearn how to work every single decade, typewriters to desktops to laptops to the cloud. They're actually the most experienced adapters in the room.
That is a profound reframing. They've survived more tech shifts than anyone.
Precisely. They're resilient.
Wow. Okay, so we've busted the myths, we've looked at the strategies, but I want to talk about the future. Anneliese says by 2032, Gen Z will be a third of the entire workforce.
That is a huge demographic wave coming right at us.
It is, and what they want fundamentally is to feel connected and understood. But Anneliese flags a massive disconnect here. She calls it the EQ gap.
This is the danger zone. The stats are really stark. You've got 70% of senior leaders who agree that emotional intelligence, or EQ, is vital.
So they know it's important, they say it's important.
In theory, but
Mm-hmm.
only 45% of Gen Z employees say they actually see their managers displaying it.
Oof, that is a massive gap between what leaders think they're doing and what their youngest employees are actually feeling.
Correct. Leaders think an open-door policy is empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Gen Z is saying, no, you're not anticipating my burnout. You're not connecting with me as a human. And that gap creates total disengagement.
So how do we close it? Anneliese lists 4 qualities of a great leader for this new world. Let's run through them.
Okay, number 1 is empathy, and she's specific. It's the ability to listen and just have a pulse on the room, sensing the emotional temperature.
Okay, number 2.
Transparency, which is huge for younger generations,
Mm-hmm.
giving the why behind the what. They want context. If you hide the logic, you lose their trust.
Makes sense. Number 3 is collaboration.
Right. And number 4, this is the one she really emphasizes, adaptability.
Why that one so much?
Because of this idea of the 100-year life, we're living longer than ever before, so our careers could span 60, maybe 70 years.
A 70-year career, that's exhausting to even think about. That is a lot of Zoom calls.
It is if you try to sprint it. But it means you're going to have so many different chapters. You might lose a job, change industries, pivot completely at age 55.
So the ability to remain curious and coachable, that's the only real survival skill.
You have to treat your career like a series of startups, not one long corporate gig.
So wrapping this all up, what's the big takeaway for you, for the listener? We've gone from boardroom stats all the way to the empathy gap.
I think the main lesson is that this multi-generational workplace, it's not a cage match. It's a huge asset. But only if you shift from that ladder mindset to the zigzag. And you have to realize that the soft skills, empathy, EQ, collaboration, those are actually the hardest currency now.
They're the things the machines can't replicate.
Exactly. And realizing your 60-year-old coworker and your 20-year-old intern actually want the same basic things, that they want to learn, they want feedback, they want to do meaningful work.
It's true.
And I want to leave you with one final thought from that 100-year life idea. It's something to really chew on.
Let's hear it.
If we are going to live to 100 and work into our 70s or 80s, does the whole concept of seniority based on age even make sense anymore? If you can learn AI at 65, reinvent yourself at 50, then maybe we should stop thinking about aging out of the workforce and start thinking about spiraling up. Maybe the peak of your career isn't 50. Maybe it's 80.
And if your peach is at 80,
Then no matter how old you are right now, you are just getting started.
peaking at 80, I kind of love that. It takes all the pressure off.
It changes the timeline completely.
It really does. Well, thank you for zigzagging with us today. We hope this gave you some tools to navigate your own team a little better.
Keep learning.
And we'll see you on the next deep dive.